Hello, I'm Raider Pilot Steve, and this is my review of the Shuttleworth Festival of Flight 2026, which was held at Old Warden Aerodrome, home of the Shuttleworth Collection. This was my third time visiting the Festival of Flight, and the second time I attended both days. There was no main theme for the show, but there was a great gathering of vintage aircraft from all over the UK and several other countries including Austria, the Czech Republic, France and Germany. Quite a few of the visiting aircraft were making their first visits to Old Warden, and several of these were making their UK airshow debuts. Both days of the show showcased a wide variety of aircraft in the air, including a few aircraft and set pieces exclusive to one of the days. In this review, I will cover the daytime and evening flying displays as a whole, rather than separate days to avoid too much repetition. The weather over the weekend was generally sunny, with some pretty stiff breezes, especially on the Sunday, which did result in some of the more delicate aircraft not participating in the flying display. First, let's take a look at the aircraft present on the ground. The engineering hangar is always worth a look, and during the Festival of Flight, 3 of the Shuttleworth Collection's aircraft were present. At the back of the hangar was their de Havilland DH-60 Cirrus Moth, the world's oldest airworthy example of a DH-60. Nearby was the Percival E2H Mu Gull, which is still a long way off from flying again whilst it is being repaired after a landing incident. And finally, the Hawker Hind, which looks like it's nearly ready to return to the skies after undergoing a lengthy restoration since it last flew sometime in 2015. On Saturday, it was wheeled out to the hangar entrance. Visitors to the show also had the opportunity to take a pleasure flight in a vintage aircraft. For the Festival of Flight, there was 3 different aircraft to choose from, including T6 Harvard Aviation's Harvard Mark IV-M Wacky Wabbit, which is based out of Duxford Aerodrome. The Cambridge Flying Group's de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth II, which is based here at Old Warden. And finally, Scalonia Airways' de Havilland DH-89A Dragon Rapide, which is based at Membury Airfield. The main paddock area played host to a few visiting aircraft. Both days saw the beautiful Beechcraft D-17S Staggerwing, which is operated by the Ham and Jam Association based in France. This particular Staggerwing was making its first visit to the UK. On Sunday, we also got a surprise visitor in the form of Peter Teichmann's Supermarine Spitfire F9 Carina, which is better known as the Soviet Spitfire. This is the only airworthy Spitfire to have served with the Soviet Air Force and was making a very rare airshow appearance, with me not seeing this aircraft since 2021. As with all air shows, technical problems and other factors can lead to cancellations, and the Festival of Flight was no different. Saturday saw the withdrawal of the Shuttleworth Collection's Bristol M1C replica and Percival P56 Provost T1 due to technical gremlins. Sunday, however, suffered more due to the wind conditions, which forced several aircraft to cancel their displays, including Airtime Aerobatics' de Havilland DH-71 Tiger Moth replica, the Shuttleworth Collection's Avro 504K, Sopwith Pup, Sopwith Triplane replica, and P&A Wood Sopwith Dove replica. The conditions on both days meant that the Shuttleworth Collection's Edwardian aircraft were unable to participate over the weekend. The weekend also featured a variety of interesting visiting aircraft that were viewable from the main flight line. Here are some of the vintage highlights. Striking black and gold Kristen Eagle II. A de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth II, operated by Vintage Flying. The Henlow Chipmunk Group's de Havilland Canada Chipmunk T10. A bright yellow Forney F1A Air Coupe, one of only 5 airworthy examples of the Air Coupe in the UK. The strange-looking Saab 91A Sophia, never seen one of these before. a Scottish Aviation Bulldog T1 based out of Popham Airfield. A Sportavia Putzer RF5B Spurbird motor glider. And finally, a Yakovlev Yak 18T based at Sherburn in Elmet Airfield. Now let's move on to the main event, the flying display. On both days, the show was opened by a glider, which was towed up by the Shuttleworth Collection's Piper PA-18 Super Cub. Saturday showcased the collection's Elliott's Primary Eon, which performed a series of gentle circuits during its descent. Sunday would have seen Graham Saw's Slingsby T-13 Petrel, but it had to detach from the tow plane early due to the strong winds. The bright red glider was able to land safely. Following this was a highly entertaining aerobatic display from Team Raven, with a 5-shipper Vans RV-8s, though Sunday's show was opened by a 6-aircraft flypast. The team were making their Shuttleworth debut and performed a variety of aerobatic manoeuvres in the nimble little kit planes, which are all resplendent in a new paint scheme for the 2026 season. The winds on Sunday certainly made things tricky for the team in regards to certain formation manoeuvres, but they persevered brilliantly. This year's Festival of Flight would feature 3 different North American P-51D Mustang displays. The first of these was from the Duxford-based Tool in the Saddle, owned by Robert Tyrrell and operated by the Aircraft Restoration Company. The opening flypast felt incredibly close, and the subsequent display was very aggressive and filled the sky with the distinctive Mustang howl. We were due to have this display on both days, but it had to cancel its appearance on Sunday due to pilot shortage. After the Mustang had departed on Saturday, we then had a trio of vintage aircraft that were introduced in the late 20s and early 30s. These are all operated by the Shuttleworth Collection and included the DeSalter Mark I, the Parnell Elf and the Southern Martlet. The 3-ship performed a series of formation passes before flying a series of gentle circuits. All 3 of these aircraft are incredibly rare, with the DeSalter being the world's only airworthy example, whilst the Elf and Martlet are the only examples of their types left in the world. World Cup fever has certainly hit the nation this year, and this was celebrated with a unique trio of aircraft representing the host nations. First up was the Shuttleworth Collection's de Havilland Canada Chipmunk T1 in Royal Canadian Air Force colours, which performed some aerobatics as it descended. It was then joined by a North American L-17A Navion in United States Army colours, which performed a series of passes and crossovers with the Chipmunk. Last but not least was Stu Goldspink with his rarely seen Mudry Cat 10B in Mexican Air Force colours, which also performed some lovely aerobatics. Stu further emphasised the Mexican flair by wearing a sombrero, which certainly amused the crowd as the aircraft taxied past. The trio then formed up for a series of flypasts. This display was also enhanced by the hilarious commentary from Ben Donnell and Adam Landau. As is somewhat traditional at Shuttleworth shows, there was a barnstorming section which featured a different display on each day. Visitors to Saturday's show had the pleasure of witnessing the Tiger Club Turbulent team and their quartet of Druin D31 Turbulents. After performing a series of formation passes, the team showcased a variety of barnstorming set pieces, including flower bombing, limbo flying and balloon bursting. This team is the world's oldest civilian display team, having been founded in 1959. Sunday saw the Shuttleworth Collection put on their own barnstorming segment with a selection of Old Warden-based aircraft. Taking part was the Blackburn B-2, the Piper PA-18 Super Cub and a pair of Miles Magisters, owned by the Collection and David Bramwell respectively. The 4-ship made a valiant attempt at flower bombing, but the limbo flying was called off due to the winds making it unsafe, so they concluded their display segment with some tail-chasing circuits. Following the Shuttleworth Barnstormers on the Sunday was a lovely aerobatic solo display from the Shuttleworth Collection's de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth II, which was very well flown in the pretty rough skies. It was unfortunate that the de Havilland DH-71 Tiger Moth replica was unable to fly as well due to the wind conditions. Sunday also saw a visit from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, who provided their Hawker Hurricane Mark IIC for a short but sweet solo display. This Hurricane is now painted to represent BE-364, as it appeared while serving as a night fighter with No. 247 China British Squadron. We were due to have the flight Spitfire LF-5B on Saturday, but this had to withdraw due to technical issues. The wind conditions over the weekend meant we only got to see World War I representation on the Saturday. This display section was kicked off with the Shuttleworth Collection Sopwith Camel F1 replica, which was the last reproduction built by the Northern Aeroplane Workshop and is painted to represent an aircraft from No. 70 Squadron. It was then joined in the air by the Shuttleworth Collection's genuine Bristol F2B fighter, which was built in 1917. It didn't see any wartime service during this time, but would later serve with No. 208 Squadron in 1923, whilst the squadron was based in Turkey. David Bremner's beautiful Bristol Scout C replica also took to the air to display, but would come back into land after one circuit, presumably due to a technical issue. We then completely changed gear with a section of unlimited aerobatics courtesy of two very accomplished pilots. On Saturday, and arriving straight from his home base at Little Granston, was Chris Burkett in his extra EA300S and put on a very energetic and exciting aerobatic routine. Chris won both the Golding Barrett Trophy and the British National Sport Power Champion Trophy in 2006, and has been an active member of the airshow circuit with his solo displays, the Little and Large duo with Mike Williams, and as part of the Global Stars aerobatic team. On Sunday, and also coming in from Little Granston, was Mark Jeffries in his more potent extra EA330 SC, and also put on an incredible masterclass display of unlimited aerobatics. Mark is very well known in the aerobatic world, having been in the top 10 in the world on 4 separate occasions in both advanced and unlimited aerobatics at FAI sanctioned contests. He is also the leader of the Global Stars aerobatic team. Now let's take a look at one of the international visitors to the show. This was the Piper J3C-65 Cub, operated by the Commemorative Air Force's French wing, which performed a short daytime display on the Saturday. This Cub was painted in a very nice grey and blue scheme, hence its nickname, the Little Blue Cloud. This scheme represents a Piper NE-1 Cub, which served in the United States Navy with Airship Squadron 32 during the Second World War. This was this particular aircraft's UK airshow debut as part of a short summer UK tour. Air racing is another theme often celebrated at Old Warden. Both days of the Festival of Flight had a different display that featured the Shuttleworth Collection's most famous air racer, the de Havilland DH-88 Comet Grosvenor House. First, we had Saturday's display, which also featured the Shuttleworth Collection's Compa Swift and Miles M2L Hawkspeed 6, which flew in and led the Comet into a brief tail chase. Following this, the Swift then put on a short solo display. The Comet and Hawkspeed 6 then returned for a formation flypast before putting on their own solo routines. Sunday saw a very different combination and saw the Comet perform a series of formation flypasts with the Flying Bull's North American P-51D Mustang Nookie Bookie 4, followed by each of their own solo displays. The Mustang was and still is a popular mount for air racing, and this particular Mustang was making its first appearance at Old Warden and was the first of several displays from the Austria-based Flying Bulls. A returning visiting aircraft from last year's Festival of Flight was the aircraft restoration company's Bristol Blenheim Mark 1F, which performed on both days of the show. Each day also saw this iconic British aircraft fly alongside a different aircraft to mark a different theme. On Saturday, the display commemorated RAF Bomber Command with a single formation flypast featuring the Blenheim and the Avro Anton Mark I from RAF Station Czechoslovakia, which was making its Shuttleworth debut. After this, they each performed their own individual displays, both of which were excellent, but the Anson's was really spectacular with the smoke generators. Sunday saw the Blenheim fly with the Shuttleworth Collection's Westland Lysander Mark IIIA in a tribute to aircraft powered by the Bristol Mercury engine. The Blenheim is powered by a pair of Bristol Mercury 15s and the Lysander by a Bristol Mercury 20. The duo performed a series of formation flypasts before splitting off for their own solo displays. Now let's take a look at some aircraft that haven't been seen at a UK airshow for some time. First up was the German-built Clem L25-1A trainer from the late 20s. I believe this aircraft is one of only 2 airworthy examples registered in the UK. It was joined in the air by the British-built version of this aircraft, the BA Swallow 2. This aircraft is also quite a rarity and is one of only 5 airworthy examples registered in the UK. The pair performed a series of gentle circuits in Old Warden's airspace and really showcased the differing performance of each aircraft due to the Swallow's 90 horsepower engine compared to the Clem's 40 horsepower engine. Saturday also saw some additional jet noise courtesy of the BAC Jet Provers T5 operated by Viper Classic Jets. This particular jet Provost has been a frequent sight at UK airshows since the early 2010s and is still painted in No. 6 Flying Training School colours. Pilot Ian Brett put on a very sleek performance in the Shuttleworth skies. Sunday featured a segment dedicated to aircraft initially developed for military duties but later converted for civilian use. Sadly, the winds were too strong for P&A Wood Sopwith Dove replica to display, so it was down to the locally based Auster J1N Alpha to go it alone. It put on a nice and tight demonstration but did suffer a rather heavy landing due to a sudden gust of wind. Fortunately, no one was hurt as far as I know. The remaining displays featured some of the most iconic warbirds of the Second World War on both days of the show. First, let's take a look at a special Battle of Britain segment. Saturday saw a trio of British warbirds, including the Shuttleworth Collection's Gloucester Gladiator Mark I and Westland Lysander Mark IIIA, which were led by the Historic Aircraft Collection's Hawker Hurricane Mark 12A, which was making its first airshow appearance since becoming an Old Warden resident. The 3 aircraft performed a few loose formation passes, which were then followed with a series of consecutive solo displays. On Sunday, we once again saw the Shuttleworth Collection's Gloucester Gladiator Mark I and the Historic Aircraft Collection's Hawker Hurricane Mark 12A. But this time, they were joined by Wolfgang Landschulz's Messerschmitt Bf 109E-4, which was making its UK airshow debut. This was the first time a genuine Bf 109 has displayed in the UK since the 1990s, and I believe the first time a Bf 109E Emil has ever displayed at a UK show. This was certainly the enthusiast's favourite. The trio performed a formation flypast to open the display segment, which was then followed by a flypast with both the Hurricane and the Bf-109. This was quite appropriate, as this particular Bf-109 was shot down by a Soviet Air Force Hurricane on the Arctic front in 1942. The pair then performed their own solo routines, with the Bf-109s being a tad high at times, but still fantastic to see and hear. The display segment was then closed by the Gladiator's own display. Following this on Sunday was a gorgeous solo display by another aircraft from the Flying Bulls' fleet, the North American B-25J Mitchell, which was also making its first visit to Old Warden. The bare metal finish on the bomber looks fantastic in the sunny skies as it was put through its paces with some surprisingly steep climbs and wingovers. A B-25 in the UK is quite a rarity, as this is currently the only airworthy example in Europe. It was hoped that the Flying Bulls' F4U-4 Corsair would join the B-25J, but this couldn't happen due to a technical issue. The penultimate display of the daytime flying programme on both days was another American bomber and Duxford's most famous resident, Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress Sally B. The large bomber put on a very special display, really using Old Warden's bend to full effect. This icon of the UK airshow circuit is now over 80 years old and has been displaying at UK shows for over 50 years. We now come to the daytime finale, which on both Saturday and Sunday featured an impressive quartet of warbirds. On both occasions, the display featured the Shuttleworth Collection Supermarine Spitfire LF-5C, Fighter Aviation Engineering Limited's Republic P-47D Thunderbolt Nellie B, and Flying Legends GmbH's North American P-51D Mustang Francis Dell, which was making its UK flying display debut. Now, those of you that can count will realise I've only mentioned 3 aircraft. This is because a different warbird took the 4th slot on each day. Saturday saw the formation feature Wolfgang Landschulz's Messerschmitt Bf-109E-4, while Sunday saw the inclusion of the Flying Bulls' Lockheed P-38L Lightning. This was one of the best warbird sequences I have ever seen, and featured formation flypasts with all 4 aircraft, followed by tail chases performed by the first 3 aircraft. There was also various solo displays, including a thrilling pairs display with the Thunderbolt and Spitfire. The Mustang performed a very entertaining display on both days, and in my view was the best of the 3 Mustangs we saw over the weekend. And yes, there was lots of the iconic Mustang whistle. Despite the height of the display, Saturday's solo display of Red 12 was our first look at a genuine Messerschmitt Bf-109 in the UK skies, and the sight and sound of this incredibly rare machine will certainly stick in my memory. Sunday saw the segment closed by a rare solo display by the Flying Bulls' Lockheed P-38L Lightning, which was my absolute favourite display of the whole weekend. The Lightning has always been a special aircraft to me since first seeing one display at Folkestone when I was 3, and getting to witness this example displayed brilliantly at Old Warden was worth the ticket cost alone. This entire warbird section was incredible to witness on both days, and I hope more set pieces like this appear at more shows in future seasons. With the daytime display concluded, we had a brief hiatus before we kicked off the evening sections. Sunday's display started with the roar of 2 Eurojet EJ200 turbofan engines of the Royal Air Force's Eurofighter Typhoon FGR-4. The multi-role jet is part of No. 29 Squadron based at RAF Coningsby. The display was a tad distant, but the noise reverberated throughout, and the afterburner looked particularly good in the evening light. Opening the evening section on Saturday and after the Typhoon on Sunday was a prelude display section whilst the glider was towed up by the Shuttleworth Collection's Piper PA-18 Super Cub. Each day had a different aircraft to display. Saturday showcased the Shuttleworth Collection's Polikarpov PO2, which is actually the only PO2 to ever display in the UK, whilst Sunday saw the Piper J3C65 Cub from the Commemorative Air Force's French wing put on its first evening display. The glider in question was the DFS Habicht E, which was painted in the iconic sunburst pattern and is owned and flown by Christoph Zahn. Upon detaching from the tow plane, the glider put on an excellent aerobatic descent, which was enhanced by the smoke generators attached to the wingtips. The display was concluded with an incredible low topside pass. The most anticipated display in my view on Saturday was our first look at the Flying Bull's fleet making their first appearance at Old Warden. This started out with a special four-ship formation which included the North American B-25J Mitchell, the North American P-51D Mustang Nookie Bookie 4, the Vought F4U4 Corsair, and the Lockheed P-38L Lightning. The formation flew in overhead and performed a series of flypasts before dividing into two distinct segments. First was a lovely solo display by the Mitchell, which was really thrown about the sky, and the sun really reflected well on the bare metal finish of this vintage bomber. The remaining three fighters had formed up and performed an exhilarating three-ship display and featured formation aerobatics, a tail chase, and a very close formation pass to conclude the display. The Flying Bulls appearing at Old Warden has been a long time coming, and I hope they return again with more of their impressive fleet, as this was certainly one of my highlights of the year. The penultimate display on both days of the evening show revolved around the Avro Anson. The Shuttleworth Collection's ever-reliable Avro Anson 19 put on a great solo display on the Saturday. But the real standout performance came on Sunday when it was joined by the Avro Anson Mark I from RAF Station, Czechoslovakia. As far as I know, this was the first time since 2012 that two Avro Ansons have flown together at a UK airshow, but it was certainly the first time these two examples have shared the skies. When these two aircraft flew together, they did so when the light was perfect and their display was honestly beautiful. After a few formation passes, the duo separated and performed their own individual displays, with the Mark I being particularly entertaining and dynamic. Due to the wind conditions on both days of the show, the more delicate aircraft couldn't participate, and so it was down to some of the hardier aircraft to close out proceedings. Saturday's show was closed by a fantastic solo display by the Shuttleworth Collection Supermarine Spitfire LF5C, which is always a treat to see on a nice evening. Sunday's show, however, was closed by the Shuttleworth Collection's racing duo, the de Havilland DH88 Comet Grosvenor House and the Miles M2L Hawkspeed 6. The pair performed a series of formation passes and would have performed solo displays, but flying was suspended shortly after the Hawkspeed 6 began its display. This was due to a traffic incident nearby which required the air ambulance to attend. A somewhat abrupt end to the Festival of Flight, but that did not take away from an amazing weekend. In conclusion, the Shuttleworth Festival of Flight 2026 was a truly brilliant show, with such a great mix of vintage aircraft over the 2 days. I thought last year's show was the Shuttleworth Collection's finest show that they've put on. I think this year's has surpassed that. This is an absolute must-attend event for any Warbird enthusiast, and I would highly advise you try and do both days. I already have my tickets for 2027. There were so many excellent displays over the weekend that choosing my favourites is a very difficult task. The obvious standout displays were from the various aircraft operated by the Flying Bulls, the UK airshow debut of the Messerschmitt Bf 109E-4 and the Avro Anton Mark I from RAF Station Czechoslovakia. I also enjoyed the appearance of the Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress Sally B on both days, and the World Cup set piece on the Sunday. If you wish to see more of my photos from this event and others, I have linked my Flickr page in the description below. You may also wish to follow me on Instagram, where I post aviation content frequently. My next review will be the Duxford American Flying Day 2026. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I hope you will join me in the next one. Bye!